And who knows who's going to trip that up, but Russia, they have their fingers everywhere. And for me, it's always been interesting because this is a homogenous Aryan core decision making. In other words, everyone in charge there is going to think like a real European, and it is homogenous with a single vision of the past, a single vision of the future. And he's going to know things about our race that we could only dream to know. He's going to know things that are going to blow minds. Russia did the foremost experiment on the pyramid-type structure. Many of you have seen the pyramids in Giza. Maybe I'll go into some of that stuff. That stuff may be fascinating for the youngins because they like that Lord of the Rings type mystical stuff. But the pyramid is a fascinating structure. And Russia, with all its land and all its open space, built some of the largest pyramids in the history of the world and did all kinds of scientific tests on that. He's going to know all kinds of interesting stuff. And I mean, it's just classic stuff. But they are the masters. They have been the masters of controlling energy, but they don't have to do anything. They're homogenous. In other words, Russia's not homogenous, but they are. You know, they got the largest European Christian cities in the history of the world, but they're homogenous in a decision-making sense. They don't have any multiculturalism. They don't have any second-generation communism. They don't have to worry about that. They may give lip service to it, but they don't have any power there. They don't have a bunch of mulatto princes working with Aryans, working with neocons and Jews. They don't have to deal with any of that. They may post a couple people in this position or post another person in that position, but they have all those Aryan grow rabbits at their critical points, and they have those big jackrabbits at the top making the moves. And when they move, the whole planet has to adjust. He can make one little move across Eurasia and cause chaos, and that's what they've done consistently. They're consistently making us move, but the type of offensive strategies he's had in foreign policy has really affected people running Anglosphere and parts of Western civilization, because he is not sitting back and playing defense like they thought someone would. You know, I mean, he was in a very weak position, but he came out playing total offense, totally like he owned the world, and now he does in many instances. Sure, I mean, he's not bankrupt. He could claim the European gene pool, and not only that, they could call tribunals. They could do all kinds of interesting things. And he's just getting warmed up. So, I mean, it's very, very impressive stuff. You know, if you come back from the brink of death in a handful of years, and the next thing you know, you put Anglos, you put certain parties in Western civilization's New World Order on the rocks permanently. You know, you force their hand across the board. You give them chaos all across the planet without ever moving. It's funny stuff. And what was interesting is it's a great example of how what works, what affects you also affects everyone else, including your enemy. Yes, if there's a certain source of something monumental going on, like a change in information flow. We had a total change on the planet with the internet. And so what happened at the top of Anglosphere and certain parts of Western civilization is everyone was stuck in a mode of thinking. And they were all very successful. You had the CFR, Trilateral Commission, all these decision-making authorities, very, very successful. And they're sitting around reading their own press. They're sitting around reading their own newspapers. And they own them. They're sitting around reading their own publications, and they own the publications. They're sitting watching their own news channels, and they own the news channels. Now, all of a sudden, all that's irrelevant. But guess what? They didn't see that immediately. They got stuck in a mode of thinking. They got stuck in a consensus trance, didn't they? Yeah. They just got leveled to the ground. They got totally blindsided by the Russians. You know, everyone's sitting online reading all these statements, even all these conspiracy websites, which, you know, it's never a conspiracy because peas in a pod do not have to conspire. Yeah, and we'll never have to conspire. There's never going to be a conspiracy because peas in a pod do not have to conspire. And indigenous white rabbits, the white rabbits sitting in their pea patch won't have to conspire either. It's never a conspiracy, so get that out of your head. But if they're sitting around all stuck in a consensus mode of thinking, a consensus trance, all used to having all this control, all of a sudden that control is gone. That control was gone overnight, and they didn't realize it. But, you know, it's kind of funny. Don't think this doesn't affect the elites. It does. It affects whole segments. Look at how much power they've lost in the media. They totally lost control over the media overnight and really didn't realize it. They have not adjusted to this day. But that's what happens when you've been in power for so long, and you just get hammered to the ground by some new form of communication, new form of technology. It's kind of like the printing press. You know, they didn't realize what happened until it was done. But Russia really caught them off guard. Their analysis was stale. Everything was stale. And so they're looking at these guys. They're not multicultural. They're not multiracial, but they're putting the blade to them across the board, putting them in a full court press. And of course, the first thing they did, they panicked. They tried to get that neo-Nazi stuff going, and they did a good job. They were supporting all the nationalist groups. They had all kinds of intelligence services. Who knows what was in there? Russians were arresting them and kicking them out. Maybe you've read about that. But Brzezinski, he immediately starts supporting the Nazi Party and all these different groups of nationalist groups in Russia, trying to support neo-Nazism in Russia, National Socialism, basically. I've never ever read any remake of Nazism. I mean, the neocons remade conservatism, but there are no neo-Nazis. I've never read a remake. So if you are a neo-Nazi, you actually have a new National Socialism. Please post something on Bugs, because I've never seen it in all my research of National Socialism. But anyways, he started supporting everyone that called themselves a Nazi, any type of nationalism in Russia. They were trying to create that problem. He didn't give them that energy flow. He's never let them have the upper hand internally. He's done it by any means necessary, even if it means squashing groups that they liked, or doing behind the scenes deal and say, you know, you got to do that Russia for the Russians. You're going to have to use your heads here. We're playing a very dangerous game, and we're playing a long-run game, and you better get on board. We're not going to tolerate that, because we got an enemy here that, you know, that is trying to put the screws to us, so on and so forth. And you know, I think the greatest example, Brzezinski has over the past, I would say 7 or 8 months. I'm talking to you in May, June 2009, and Brzezinski has said in the last 4 or 5 months that having a multiracial, multicultural Anglosphere and formulating a foreign policy has been near impossible. They're admitting they got problems. They're admitting they got big problems. James Baker said, well, you know, World War II was just over money, was just over banking deals. We're just over differences in banking. Real nice. Millions of young men go and die, and of course, it's just it was all about money. But it sounds like some deals are being cut, doesn't it? Sounds like someone's got some problems. So anyways, old Pooty Poot was putting the screws to people. And one of the things you saw with the Georgia war is, you see, they're supposed to have open borders. Russia's, you know, all across the world, someone made that rule. You know, the gods, some god made that rule, or someone who thought they were God made that rule, that everyone has to have open borders. Well, Russia really doesn't care who makes your rules. You know, they'll say, fine, you can have an open border, but wait, you challenge our borders. They did. That's what that Georgia thing was all about. They were going to challenge Russia's border. They were going to try to make a move. We saw what happened there. But if someone declares a war on you, if someone sneaks, attacks you, tries to get in there and tries to take over territory real quick, well, that's a war. You can do whatever you want it to do. And you saw what he did. Not only did he do that, he's pointing missiles at London. I mean, he's pointing, those aren't small missiles he's pointing around. He's serious about the business. He's saying, let's rock and roll. But what's interesting about the Georgia war, the thing that most people don't notice or most people don't read about, is what was fascinating is what type of public support the Russian leadership had. And again, this is a huge oligarchic structure in Russia. It is very deep and very broad. It's the broadest, deepest Aryan type of oligarchy we've ever seen. Never seen anything like this put together. He's already got his 5th generation in line, or maybe even his 10th generation, those little Russian corps, males and females. They're identifying them at a young age, bringing them in and letting them go to work. But one of the things he did, they had like a 90% approval rating for war, or like a 98% approval rating within 30 minutes, and it was ridiculous. It held beyond the 90-minute point and everything else. They immediately had that type of turnaround in that Georgia war. That's unheard of. Our Pentagon couldn't pray in America or London. We couldn't pray for that type of support for Iraq war. This ain't going to happen. That's the problem with a multiracial, multicultural country. You can't hold it together. That's what Brzezinski's talking about. He's talking about all these different factors. But they're getting a lot of pissed off generals and whatnot. I mean, the Russians can put that together, and they don't have to move. They don't really have to do anything. We're expending all this energy. He doesn't have to. He doesn't send troops around. Not only that, it looks great for European children. Here you have a European leader. He's sitting back. He's minding his own business. Heavens knows he's got enough land. He's got enough land to fit all the Europeans on the planet.